Hi there, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Lenko Show, the place to go for all things health and performance related. So today, this is show episode number 21. Following on with another guest. So our previous guest, episode 18 with Sam Ruddock, was absolutely awesome. We've had some great feedback on that. So hopefully, a lot more of you enjoyed that as well. Today, I am sitting down and I'm speaking to one of my former teammates, university friends, uh, a man who is recently a retired international and professional American football player. He's now transitioning to becoming a performance specialist, studying a master's in performance psychology and working as a trainer for rehab, performance, and therapy. This guy is obsessed with holistic self-development, from strength and conditioning, spiritual practices, psychology, the lot. So, to be honest, it's a little bit like kind of reading into my own interests and thoughts. So, this should be an absolutely class conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very, very pleased and delighted, in fact, to bring you John Kenyon. John Kenyon, welcome to the show. Now, one of the things I've actually forgot to mention during the intro is just you are the definition of proper Yorkshire. You are up there alongside Sean Bean in terms of your Yorkshireness. Surely,
Gee over. Absolute dream being compared to Sean Bean. Although he's from Sheffield, so South Yorkshire, not West Yorkshire.
Yeah, I'm technically from Sheffield as well, so be careful. So you're currently over in Germany. What's going on?
I'm currently out in Potsdam, Germany, just outside of Berlin. What's going on? Lockdown, of course. It's a little bit different to what you guys have. Like, if I go out on the street now, I have to wear a mask. It was a bit weird because at the start, I think being here, I was a little bit, what's the word? I do this will happen a lot. I'll start forgetting English words because I speak German most of the time. I was a little bit, I was bragging a little bit because we had it better here, but it seems to have flipped a little bit and we're catching up in all the bad ways. But they've got some stricter measurements in some ways, and then in other ways it's a bit more lenient. But yeah, for example, I go on the street now, I'm wearing a mask.
And you're all right with that?
No, I'm not. There's a lot of things I'm not all right with it. Straight into the big topics. No, I'm not really all right with stuff like that. Because the thing is, there's too many contradictions that I have to wear a mask here on the open streets, fresh air, nobody around me. I get to work and don't technically have to wear a mask even though I'm surrounded by people.
Do you know what? I think I don't really want to take up the entire episode talking about COVID or anything, or the restrictions or anything like that, because I think if we were to compare what's going on in Germany and what's going on in the UK, we'll find 1,000,001 different things that we would do and change.
Yeah. For me, it's just they're using a hammer, and when you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That seems to be the approach. But it's just, I don't know, the way it's getting to people, everyone's just down. It's like everyone's in a bit of a depressed phase, and yeah, it's not enjoyable. Like I remember when they first got they put the signs up saying you have to wear a mask here on the street, and I'm walking to work. I'm thinking, there's literally nobody within 50 meters of me. I'm not going to wear a mask. And then I'm thinking, I also don't want to get fined €250 or whatever it is. So I'm going to put my mask on. And I'm like, no, I feel like I'm being controlled here for no good reason. Like, I'll do it if there's a good reason. And right now there's no good reason. I took the mask off. And then I'm like, no, I should probably wear it because I don't want to get caught. Put the mask back on. Just having this like internal conflict within myself about wearing a mask on the street. It's just
the turmoil.
Yeah, it was. But I mean, other than that, life goes on. You got to make the best of it.
Yeah, let's just obliterate all forms of common sense and just be ruled by very hard lines. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. You're allowed outside, you're not allowed outside.
Well,
So,
they've never stopped that here, being not going out. Oh, well, no, sorry, they have. We have a curfew actually from like 10 o'clock at night, I think. 10 till 5 when everybody else out. So 10 overnight up until 5 a.m. I think there's a curfew, but no one's out at that time anyway.
well, that's just. I mean, if you are out at that time, you're probably doing some dodgy shit anyway, right, aren't you?
Well, to be fair, live on quite a busy street here, and the first lockdown, that's what we did notice. If anyone was out after that time, they were skeptical of the types of people that they might have been.
I think being out at that kind of time is a definite lifestyle choice, isn't it? You make some significant decisions about your future at that point.
That is true.
So what's the Yorkshire German accent combination?
Give me something to say, and I'll try it. Don't make it too complicated, though, if I'm under pressure now.
All right, say good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Lenko Show. I'm going to absolutely blow your nuts off with today's tips for performance and health.
Okay, guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren. Herzlich willkommen zu The Lenko Show mit unserer wunderbaren Presenter.
I think that's spot on, mate. Well done.
Naja.
Appreciate that. That's quite good. I enjoyed that. I was just curious. I didn't even necessarily think you were going to respond and offer up some German. I just thought you were going to tell me that you were getting on all right, or sometimes people are very confused by what you say.
So people are confused if I speak English anyway, especially when I start mumbling. I have to really concentrate on enunciating all my words, but
yeah,
it's even. Like I said, I get lazy, and I've gotten lazy because I taught myself up to, if anyone knows about languages, there's A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2 levels that you can do. C2 being basically native level. B2 is basically the minimum you kind of need to work and study and stuff here. So I've got my B2 and I taught myself the B2. I taught myself up to B2 level. So I used to spend every day just practicing, doing lessons, doing whatever. And then since I did the exam, I basically stopped doing that. So you start to pick up bad habits or let old habits come in that aren't so productive to expressing yourself as clearly as possible.
Yeah, it's the same with all practices, though, isn't it? Like you practice, you study, you train. You know, you get to your competition, your exam, and then once that's done, then you just kind of fall back into patterns, and maybe you don't put the same level of preparation into whatever it is you were doing.
Yeah, and I think enough sticks. Like sentence, specifically to speak in a language, like the sentence structure sticks. Vocabulary doesn't. That's what I've noticed. Like vocabulary doesn't stick unless you use it. You start to lose it, which makes sense. But I felt like enough of it stuck that I could keep working and don't have to worry about it too much.
Yeah. Again, another principle of sports performance there as well. You don't use it, you lose it.
Well, that's also been happening. I haven't really been training as much as I used to do, so I'm certainly not as strong as I used to be, and that's something else that you have to get used to.
It's not a nice place to be in, is it, when you're in decline in such a manner?
Well, to begin with, if we're getting to that, then basically I retired from football at the end of 2018. It was now. No. Was it 18? No, 2019. Sorry, 2019. That's when I retired. Ended that
Pre-COVID?
season.
Pre-COVID,
so I'd already retired.
See, I missed the Sky Sports bulletin on that. I didn't realise you'd actually retired, mate. I didn't know. I was quite surprised when you told me ahead of this. I was like,
I haven't. Despite updating everybody constantly throughout my career, there was basically a hiatus towards the end, and I've thought about doing it, and I probably should do it because I feel like maybe it's been a bit selfish, but I feel like there's enough people interested that would maybe like to know that it's come to an end. I just never got around to doing it, and I sort of had a phase where I moved away from using social media, at least for posting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And just, I don't know, never felt like the timing was right, even though it's a stupid concept because it's just do it basically. But yes, if anybody's listening, I have retired since 2019.
First off, like I just want to ask you, like, why did you decide to retire? Why did you choose to retire? Because did you know that this was coming? COVID was going to mean all sports was, cancelled for the next few years, or like what was going on?
Well, that ended up being decent because I mean, if I had all my eggs in that basket of playing sport, playing football, it might have been ideal. I mean, it's already affected enough of sort of my job situation as it is. No, it was different factors. Injuries was one of them. I've had plenty of injuries, plenty of severe injuries, a couple of concussions. Had some problems with the organization that I was with, and that kind of took away a lot of the joy that I used to experience with football. And then also I really had to think, okay, what am I doing with my future now? Because it's a fun thing to do. You can make, some sort of life out of it, but it's definitely not a sort of long-term career. So I really like to think, okay, if I'm planning to stay here in a foreign country, football's not necessarily going to be the answer. It's played a part, but it's not going to be the whole deal. So what are you going to do afterwards? So basically planning for life after football and getting into other stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that came up when I was talking to Sam Ruddock, who you know as well.
I've listened to that one the other day while I was working out. It's very good.
And he was talking about, as an athlete, you've got to have that plan for the afterlife, because there's only a small period of time. If you think about it in terms of your overall lifespan, there's only a small period of time where your body and your mind is in that peak physical condition that you can, compete at that elite level, which you have done.
I mean, my body was capable. My mind wasn't there anymore.
What was that change? What was that switch that went?
Oh, it wasn't a switch. It was a long sort of dimming down of
the dial.
Yeah. But I still wanted to. There was a lot of problems. How do we say this? I'm got to think about where to sort of start with it. But
yeah.
The funny thing is, now with my studies, I see all the things that could have been better, or what would ideally have been done differently, or in the ideal situation would be, or things that I experienced. I say, oh, okay, that's what I experienced. I will say there was some organizational problems, and then also some sort of like support problems as well. And also I was so involved that I saw a lot of things as well that I didn't agree with, or not necessarily agree, but also just seeing other people suffer as well. And so then you realize, this isn't fun. And then you start to lose like motivation. You start questioning things, questioning why you're doing it. And all in all, I mean, it spiraled pretty deep to the point of having like panic attacks after games, living in a state of anxiety basically all the time. And when you're in that sort of mindset, it's really hard to then go out on a field and put your body on the line and perform at a really high level. And eventually it's too much and you can't really do it anymore. It's kind of how it went.
Yeah. What like take us through what was that like? Like what did you experience firstly in terms of the organizational problems?
Well, I'll say this, because obviously European football is getting bigger and bigger, and more kids from the UK are now going over to play European football and also playing at high levels in European football. But I think it's different when you start doing something for money, and when there's sort of like your livelihood on the line based on your performances. That brings a whole different pressure with it. So that was always, I remember for my first season, was always very in the back of my mind, like, you have to perform, otherwise they'll send you home,
Yeah, I suppose that, especially in American football, that attitude is very quite cutthroat and ruthless, isn't it? Like, for anyone that's watched Hard Knocks, I guess.
Well, it was also the reality. It's like,
yeah,
it's a business, and if you're not going to perform, then why should they particularly keep you? And yeah, also, did it happen? I think I saw it. At least heard about it potentially happening to other people, and then you're like, okay, gosh, it could happen. But I mean, that depends on the person, right? I like that. Those thoughts were with me, but for other people, it was, it's not a concern. They're here to do a job. And that sort of thing doesn't get to them. But that's, I guess, where it started. But that started with me. Just seeing, I guess, the way people were being treated a little bit. I guess overall, it wasn't particularly the most supportive and nurturing in the sense of building professional athletes. The environment wasn't particularly set up to do that. It varied between year to year, obviously, with different coaches and stuff like that being involved, but particularly towards the end, it was a lot of demand for a lot of people and not necessarily the backing to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder whether, in the world of sport, as we see it, like we know the American model is very much like you've got your franchise and that's your performance team. Like that's, you're at that team or you're at that franchise because you deliver and you can do a job on the field. Other than you being able to do the job on the field, there isn't a lot behind it in terms of developing you as a person, a player, as an athlete. It's kind of irrelevant. It's like, can you do the job? Yes or no. Can you do the job better than this guy? Yes or no. Whereas, in terms of like if you go away from that in the private sector, I think this is probably where, maybe you'll agree with me on this, but performance coaches who aren't necessarily directly associated with a club as in employed by them, but they kind of take the athletes under the wings, develop them, do the coaching, focus on the game and sports development, and then put them in the best position possible where they can go and deliver. And the organization just kind of goes, don't really care about you. You are essentially a piece of meat. It's like, do your job.
It can be. And I think also, well, with coaching in general, you have, especially in sport, you have coaches who maybe played the sport and then coach a sport, but they don't know how to coach. That is a science in itself, science and an art in itself. So they have the knowledge, but they can't apply it in necessarily the most optimized ways because, well, they don't know how, because there is, certain structures, frameworks, support mechanisms, psychological theories that you can apply to better coach. But I mean, the thing is also different between, you're talking NFL, which is professional, where they probably have access to a lot of other support staff, not just the coaching staff.
Yeah.
So I mean, it depends on each situation is different, but it's a question also of, okay, because you were saying about like, can you do the job? Can you do it better than the other person? But then you can flip that question and say, okay, we think you can do the job, or we can see you doing the job. How can we get you to do the job? Or you've been doing the job, now you're not really doing the job as well as before. What's changed and what can we do to get you back on track?
Yeah, well, I think that's the difference between kind of assessing a player and deciding whether a player is worthy, and then actually developing and coaching a player. That's where you then ask those different questions on another level, which a lot of people don't do they? It's just kind of, are you good enough? Yeah, fine, we'll play. If not, then you're riding the bench or you're playing second fiddle to someone else. And I've seen it myself in plenty of teams, plenty of sports where you've got guys who pretty much ride the bench all season, or they don't get on, they don't get a chance to perform. But then you look at the training sessions and the practices, all the time and all the energy goes into the guys who are starting or play fundamental roles, and that's kind of how it filters down. I'm not saying that should necessarily change, but if you yourself as an athlete are possibly in that position where you're not starting every week or you're not playing every week, you've got to take the responsibility to say and put yourself in the frame, don't you?
Well, you have to be there first of all. You have to put in the work. There's no doubt about that. But depends how deep you go with it. Each player should ideally have some sort of framework, or at least a plan of where they want to be, how the team see them, or what role the team see them playing, and how they're going to get there.
Yeah.
So when they go into practice, they think, okay, I'm second string. That's how it is now. But my goal is to be, I don't know, by the end of the year, pushing the starters for their place. And coach knows that, I know that, and then we work together in practice to make that happen. Rather than it being a case of, here's all the starters, they get all the reps, and if you're second string, try and steal someone you can, but you're not going to get much attention. You're going to feel pretty excluded.
Yeah.
Because then
I think that's something that came out.
Stuff like that is going to drop.
Yeah. Well, I think that was something that came out hopefully when I spoke to Jason Scott on the episode that I did with him, where we were talking about, essentially the main role of a coach is to, provide that environment and the opportunity for everyone to be successful. And if every individual's successful, then, the team's going to succeed as well.
Yep.
So in terms of...
It's funny because I actually wrote one of my assignments on optimizing American football, actually. It was American football practice environment and optimizing it in terms of motivation it was. But those sort of things, I literally covered some of those things, excluding second string players and stuff like that. What
kind of things did you come across there, or what kind of conclusions or practices would you implement as a result?
Well, in this specific, because I basically made a case study, and one of the things I mentioned was that a lot of the second string, third string players were left out of reps. They didn't get a lot of team reps, blah, blah, blah. Didn't get as much attention. The way I corrected it was I just built in a good rotational system. So they got a fair amount of reps. And then also combine that with the coaches having some sort of structured feedback model that they can use in practice. So then the feedback's fairly shared. And so are the reps, as best they can.
What was the structure to that feedback?
What did I go with? I went with, you can do feedback in many different ways. I think the ones I went with in this case were like a summary feedback, so that after every drill, at the end of the drill period, they'll do a quick little summary feedback. So the coach would say, on average, from what I've seen right now, so this and this needs to improve, or this and this was good, blah, blah, blah. I think that I then combined that with sort of a timed structure. So every sort of third rep give feedback. No, sorry, wrong. I think I did it more of a bandwidth feedback. So there's the ideal standard that they're going to stick to, and when the performance goes outside of that standard by a certain amount, then they give feedback. Yeah, that's what I think it was. So you've got a bandwidth of tolerable performance, and when it's too far outside of that bandwidth, you say, okay, let's check it in and do this a little bit better.
That's quite an interesting concept, actually. That's very interesting.
There's quite a few ways with feedback, and because it's important, because different people need different feedback at different points. If you're a beginner, it needs different feedback from sort of an intermediate, and who needs a different feedback from more of an expert. It's quite interesting, and that's this is what I mean. How to which detail you go into is it's a whole science, and then the application is the art. When okay, a beginner who's just learning a movement, he's going to be slow and clunky, and it's going to be awkward, and he's going to use a lot of working memory just to conceptualize the movement he's trying to do. He's going to think, okay, move right arm, move right leg, step by step. So your feedback has to then match to that process in his brain.
Yeah.
Then you've got, on the opposite scale, someone who's an absolute expert. Everything's automated in their brain. The movement's one conceptual chunk in the brain. It's called chunking. So they've got one movement, one thought process, basically. So then your feedback needs to completely different for them. It could just be one single word. Okay, smooth. let's do it smooth, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
They probably don't need as much feedback, and they're probably also very aware of the mistakes they've made because they've got such a good mental image and mental feeling of how to perform the skill. They know themselves when they've done it wrong.
Yeah.
Then you might not want to say you did it wrong, or you right foot wrong. You might want to say you were 2 yards behind, or I don't know, something like that. A knowledge of the actual result of what's happened rather than a knowledge of their performance. Slightly different things.
Yeah. I think, and again, that comes down to, in terms of what you were saying about, a lot of coaches are simply people who've played before, retired from the sport, then gone into coaching purely because they know the sport. But as you've just said there, like coaching, being able to, improve a team and improve an individual, a lot of that relies on you being able to give good feedback. And that is essentially coaching. Coaching is the ability to communicate what you want the person to learn. And to do that, you have to know the person, don't you? And I think when it comes down to individual differences, I mean, I don't know what you're like as an athlete, but I know that I'm very much like, I know when I've fucked up, essentially. Like, I know when I've done something wrong. Like, it's good to have someone, correct. But there's times where I've been, you can see the end result and you're like, oh, man.
Yeah, for a kicker, it's very obvious, right? Well, when you were kicking, it was very obvious. So then you have to take that into account. You don't need to tell the kicker you missed. You need to tell him, I don't know, perhaps why, what he could have done better, what it might be.
Yeah, I think. But again, that comes down to the differences there are so minute and precise in terms of the individualization of it that
Yeah, I mean, to individualize is really not feasible. I know they do it in professional sports at some level, like the England cricket team, who when they won the World Cup, they had a full project of individualized player profiles, the personalities, loads of different stuff. They asked the coaches, okay, how do they react under pressure? What do the behavior like? What they like in practice? Built these profiles about them, and then could feed back to the coaches, okay, to get the best out of this guy, you need to practice in this and this way because of this. So, I mean, to then win the World Cup is pretty cool on the back of that. To have that as a part of it, to show how important it is. But then to expect your local soccer team to do that it's not going to happen. But I think there's some pretty foundational skills and theories and knowledge you could learn to do with coaching that would make a really big difference.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to go into, because I'm sure we'll talk sports psychology, performance psychology a lot more as we go along. But I just want to delve a little bit more into your road, your journey into professional sport, what that was like in the beginning, the mentality behind it, your goals and ambitions, and how did it all unfold? And then when you did get there, what was the shift like in terms of reality? You already mentioned about you're playing for a wage, like it's your job, it's a career, like it's completely different to what you were doing before, probably as an amateur or just as a hobby. So just talk us through that. Like, how did you get involved in the sport first and foremost, and then how did it go from there?
So I started with football, with American football. It was end of 15. So I was pretty much 16, but it was end of 15. So that's 12 years ago now, thereabouts. I think I got into it because I used to play basketball. And that was my favorite sport for a while. And I got into sort of the American sports scene. And basketball was pretty intense. There was a lot of the American hoorah and all the, characters and all that sort of stuff that goes along with American sports and the American way of life, I guess. And then I saw football and I was like, okay, this is taking all that intensity and madness and put it on another level. I was like, I want to do that. So then I think like every British kid, I started playing Madden. And my good friend Jordan Lockwood, he actually found a team near us when we were still in school. That was back then, it was the Yorkshire Rams. So he went to a couple of training sessions. He came back and had these huge bruises all down his arm, just looked like he'd been battered. And I thought, sick, I want to do that.
It's the whole American hoorah and the whooping and hollering and, you know, all the singing or dancing kind of attitude, and then it's just bubbling that into just a big mess of aggression, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
You saw all these bruises, all these kind of cuts, grazes, scars, and you thought, yeah, I want some of that shit.
I want to do it. I used to watch videos of like John Lynch and these old school players and be like, that intensity. I don't know why. I don't know where it came from, why I related so much to it, why I thought there's some sort of appeal there. Like Brian Dawkins, I used to watch his highlights all the time. And I loved the idea that Brian Dawkins had this Weapon X alter ego that he used on the field. I thought that was, I don't know, I just fell in love with that. So that was sort of the initial inspiration. And then I went down to play for the Yorkshire Rams youth team. I think I joined halfway through the season, so I played the back end of the season. There's a hilarious picture actually of my first game. Or was it it was my first start. So messed the timeline up a little bit here, but it was my first start, and we're playing against the Lancashire Wolverines. And there's a hilarious picture now of me trying to block John Varney, me as like a 16-year-old stick, just started in the gym, trying to block John Varney, who was this football phenom.
Yeah, he's an absolute beast.
And I'm just like hanging on the back of him, arms spread out, holding him, just not got a chance.
No, he was actually the one responsible for getting me into the sport in the first place as well.
Yeah,
so
he's a top guy, man.
It
was just, so that was a start. Played youth football for, well, then we then changed to being the Leeds Bobcats. So I played a couple of years youth football for the Leeds Bobcats under Paul Goodwood, also an absolute legend. And he also was a pretty, I'll say old school, but he was, pretty direct and hardcore with some of the training, I'd say. I mean, it was the typical old school football training a lot of the time, but he also instilled the sort of be an athlete first and then you can play football mentality that I took for a long time. And I think that made a massive difference, certainly in the British game, because as we used to say in Loughborough, there's a lot of dobbies that play football. So if you can be somewhat of a decent athlete, it already sets you apart. And it's true. It's true.
Do you know what? It's been such a long time since I've heard that.
It's been a long time since I've said it, but
about a team having a load of dobbies or a load of dobbies playing the sport. For anyone that hasn't heard that before, because I know I've got a lot of my clients that listen to this, what is the description of a dobby, if you don't mind going into that?
Well, who's Dobby from Harry Potter? He's a little house elf. So imagine a house elf with football pads on. It looks even worse. So that's what a dobby is. It's someone who's unathletic or untrained, and yeah,
it's one of them where you watch a team get off the coach and you just look at them and you look at the players that are coming out there and you just think, yeah, we'll sort these lads out today.
But the thing is, it's a physical sport, and at the end of the day, if I know, okay, I don't have to worry about the physical side of the game, then I can take care of the tactics and all the other stuff, then it's one less thing to worry about.
Yeah.
And I think that is one thing in the UK that's different about football, is that, I don't know if most people, but a lot of people certainly get involved at the university level. And people play football that wouldn't necessarily play rugby, for example. And so then you get a bit more inclusion in that regard. But at the end of it, it's a physical game. And so not being a dobby is always a good thing if you want to play football and in general.
Yeah.
So that was youth football. And then I was going to university. And I was going to go to university to play football. That was the mindset I had. So Loughborough was my first choice. I applied twice to Loughborough, actually, just to make sure I got in. 2
different courses?
Same course. One was a bachelor's and one was a master's.
Straight off the bat. Brilliant.
It's just where I wanted to go. And I mean, at that time, they were also, coming back off competing for national championships and stuff like that. So it made sense as well. I did visit Birmingham, but they were a second choice. And
good reason.
I visited like Manchester and somewhere else, but went to Loughborough and lived the dream at Loughborough, playing football, meeting guys like everyone else we just mentioned, John Varney and co, some absolute animals. In terms of mindset, like I said, like I went to uni to play football, get my degree. I wanted to do that too, obviously, but it was very much I don't know. It was very much like I wanted that American college experience. I wanted to be here. I am on my scholarship. I'm here. I'm playing football at university. This is what I was imagining in my head. I'm here at a big time program, and I'm gonna just dedicate myself to it. And that's what I did. I can still always remember my first practice session, or one of my first practice sessions at Loughborough. Well, my very first session, that's where I got the name Bobcat, because I had my Leeds Bobcat t-shirt on, and so that stuck for 4 years while I was at university there. But I remember one of the first few practices, I was playing corner, I was in the flat, and Adam Hope, of all people, this demigod of British football, who obviously these sort of guys were there when I arrived, and I was like, that's what I'm going to be like. He ran, I don't know, it must have been some route into the flat, and I just, no arms, just hit the guy, hit Hope, knocked him on the floor.
You knocked him on the floor.
I knocked him on. Well, of course, he ran into the flat, blindsided, going to catch the ball. I had a free shot on him.
Do you know what?
I took it, but I didn't celebrate it because I knew he was going to be pissed off, and I knew he was going to fucking come and try and get me on the next play. So I was absolutely bricking it. And the next play, I can remember this. I couldn't concentrate on anything else because I knew he was going to be looking for me. And thankfully, the whistle blows, and he just stops right next to me, right in my ear roll, and he didn't get to hit me because the whistle blew too early, and I was thankful for that.
Wow. Do you know what? Can I just say, on Adam Hope's behalf, that I have been in exactly his position, where I've run that route, I've had the ball thrown to me, I've caught it, then I've had the snot knocked out of me, quite literally, like being hit fairly hard, to the point where there was just an explosion out of my nose onto my jersey, like made a right mess. I ended up on the floor, and I was like, right, okay, fair enough. And then, it is a case of I'm coming looking for you, going on a hunt.
Of course it is, because football, it's possible in football to do that. It gives you the opportunities, and
you can do things in football that you can't do on the street.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
But that was, first session. And then I played, I actually only played 3 years at Loughborough because of injury. Great time, great people, great coaches. Really was just the best experience. I don't know. It's like, if we're going to mindset there was always a really deep motivation. It was really football and nothing. I had something going on at home or problems or whatever. I'd go to practice and be like, I'd feel sorry for anybody that was having to go against me in drills, because I was like, I'm here to let out a lot of energy, we'll say. And you're right there. It was always very emotional. I was always very emotionally involved with it in all ways, in enjoying it, in being sad with it, everything, being angry with it. I always funneled my emotions into it, I should say. Which is why I love the film Friday Night Lights, the film, not the series. I've never seen the series, but I've seen the film, and brings me to tears every time almost. But it's that almost just that almost stupid emotional connection to it.
Just imagine that on the front cover of the DVD release. This film almost
will almost bring you to tears.
So emotional, you'll nearly cry.
Yeah, but it's that true brotherhood that you have. Everyone fighting for the same thing, and you're there all the time, and you're practicing all the time together and going through a lot. And everybody, the thing is, this is what leads on to, I guess, what I said earlier about when you start earning money with it, is everybody's doing it for the same reasons at that point. Everybody's doing it because they really love the sport or they enjoy it. And so there's a little bit of more purity to it there. And maybe a little bit less ego involved. And also there's a whole other factor taken off the table when there's no money involved. Played there. I guess that was also the start of my real injury career at the same time. Had some reasonably significant injuries while playing there. And the answer to injuries, or a big part of getting through injuries, is being strong and being a beast. Like, just being... And I see it more now with the work that I do. It's just, if you look after your body, it can do so much for you. Like, that's one of the biggest reasons to be fit and healthy, is for when shit hits the fan. Because if you've got even just a decent baseline of health, your chances are so much higher of overcoming little niggles or serious illnesses as well.
Viruses.
It's true. It's true, and I think maybe a lot of people have maybe noticed now is that it's a good idea to look after yourself. And I'm not, you don't have to do a double body weight back squat or whatever, but just be able to run, be able to jump, be able to have some strength about you. Then it goes a long way. Had some back problems at uni. Found out I had what's called pars defect, which basically means in my lower back, one of my vertebrae is not connected properly. There's a joint missing. So it's interesting that I've had that my entire career. But the doctor said I wouldn't be paralyzed, so that was all right. So I kept on playing.
That's a comfort.
Yeah. I missed my final year at Loughborough because of an injury that I sustained in the game against Durham in the playoff game.
I remember that game.
End.
I was furious in that game.
Yeah, well, it wasn't pleasant.
I was fuming.
Wasn't it pleasant? Yeah, obviously they took down the goalposts.
Yeah. I honestly, I felt sick. I felt absolutely sick. And my biggest regret for that game was that I never got on to play at running back because I was so angry. I was so angry. But I know you got injured in that game. There was I know there was one of their lads who didn't come off too well at all from a substantial.
Yes, I remember. Oh, I'd forgotten about that. That was deep in my memory somewhere.
I believe the hammer was delivered.
Chris Horse Tits. We're talking about you right now.
Was it Chris?
Yeah.
Was it? Oh,
I
didn't think it was him. I thought it was anyway.
Well, was it a kid? He played goalkeeper for at some decent level, like in some sort of academy setup, and then he was also apparently like a model. And Chris killed, like, the flags would have been flying today because there was helmet contact, but he knocked the guy's tooth out.
Teeth.
I
believe it was multiple. Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Yes, that did happen. But yeah, that was actually my last game for Loughborough in the end. I was playing quarterback. Missed my final year, which really sucked. That was really quite difficult to go through because it's just taken away from you. And all I wanted was to play. I didn't want anything else. I just wanted to play. And then being at practice every day, just you feel like a muppet when you're injured and you can't take part. And you just feel it can get pretty dark, but you just feel like you're hurting the team. And I mean, obviously the team just moves on and does it without you. You just think, I'm letting everybody down, is how you feel. But obviously that's not the way it is. Finished at Loughborough. Played 1 year at Tamworth, thanks to Jason Scott, because I was umming and ahhing about it. And I was thinking, I want to go to Europe. I want to take an off season and get in good condition, rest up a little bit. And it was like, so I'll see you at practice tomorrow. And I was like, okay. And that was it. The rest is history. Played 1 year at Tamworth. Unbelievable time. That was
good car journeys as well, weren't they, mate?
Unbelievable car journeys. Talking about what do we talk about? All the inventions we were going to come up with. Sleeping pods for motorways, for rest. What they called?
Like service stations.
Service stations. That's the one.
And then we later found out that they'd already been done in Japan.
Always the Japanese getting there first.
Fuming.
Yeah, great car journeys. Yeah, we used to do that. Travel down to Tamworth together.
Yeah.
But I mean, you'll probably agree with me. That was unbelievable. The team atmosphere I just thought was incredible. And basically all those things that they were doing there that were being instilled are some of the things that you really need to have in place to have successful team environments.
What were some of the things that stuck out as being different on that level between Tamworth and then the transition into professional?
Well, it's here, at least in Germany, it was a whole nother level. The game speed was unbelievable. I remember my first game when I got out here in Germany. We played Bielefeld. First of all, running out to a crowd is just mind blowing. You've
Running
never
out to a
done that
crowd
before.
rather than a couple of people with dogs.
Yeah, like a crowd full of fans, like not just people, like fans of the team. It's another experience. That's so cool, and that you have to get used to that, because at first you're like, everyone's shouting and you can hear them, and it's loud and it's distracting in a lot of ways. But you do get used to it, and then yeah, it's not so. I was always appreciative of it, because it was always like, this is always crazy that people are here spending the money supporting the team, which eventually, I guess, came into your pocket. But you do get used to it. But it's still incredible. I can remember running out in my first game. But the game speed was just on another level. First of all, because I've got American quarterbacks, or pretty much every team has an American quarterback, so the ball is snap and it's there where it needs to be, or in the intended area. The physicality was much higher. I remember vividly being on a field goal team, not something I ever enjoyed, and just getting pancaked by some like 6'6". I guess he was some German fella, but pretty much a beast. Just pancaked me, dumped me on the floor. I thought, okay, it's a little bit embarrassing. I didn't even stand a chance. And I went to get up, and he just pushed me back down into the dirt. And I'm like, okay, so it's like this. It's like this next level nastiness, intensity of just people just going at it. Super. I don't know. You see it in like just that tenaciousness. I thought, Jesus, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. It was a huge step up. The game speed was really noticeable. But I only made it to halftime in that game because, well, funnily enough, a receiver in the flat, I came up and drilled him without the arms, and just, you get a free shot. I took it, drilled him, got up and thought, oh, my shoulder stings a little bit. Tried to carry on. I'm running down on kickoffs. Can't really move my right arm very well. I think, oh, this is not good. But the thing is, you never think it's anything serious. You think, oh, it's just a stinger. You've strained your neck muscles a little bit. It's going to just be uncomfortable. Go to see the physios. They reckon I dislocated it. And so they say to me, we're not completely sure, but we think it might be dislocated. We can try put it back in place if you want. And I'm like, yeah, I just want to get on the field. So I'm inside in the stadium, and they're like putting their feet on my side and just yanking my arm, trying to pull it back into place, which turned out was a false diagnosis. I had actually fractured my coracoid process. So it's basically a hook of bone that comes out from your shoulder where your bicep tendons attach. But I didn't know that.
And then you've just got a couple of guys just yanking on your arm.
Yeah, which, well, looking back, is really quite bad, and yeah, could have made it a whole lot worse. But I was in hospital at halftime. So I've just signed a contract, gone out to play football, and at halftime I'm in a hospital in Germany, thinking, okay, that didn't go very well, and I'll be seeing my family again in England soon. But thankfully that wasn't the case. Coach called me and said, don't worry about any of that stuff. We'll get you sorted. Which, well, that started the first year of a really horrible year involving lots of painkillers, because I even had it x-rayed at the hospital and they didn't find the fracture. They just said there was internal bleeding and stuff like that. So I started having rehab for my shoulder, thinking, oh, it's just some soft tissue damage. I'm there doing like stupid band exercises and whatnot, trying to rehab a fractured bone. Unknowingly.
Just as an FYI for anyone listening, in terms of rehab, if you have broken a bone in your arm, you can do all the banded external rotations in the world. It ain't going to do shit for you. It's doing nothing.
It really didn't do anything. And I missed 2 games, I think, and then I played the rest of the season. Just popping ibuprofen, popping painkillers like Smarties, really like 1.6 grams of ibuprofen or whatever it was every game. Just, I could do a certain amount, and then a one movement I'd do something, move it too fast, move it the wrong way, and just 10 from 10, 10 out of 10 pain, shooting in my shoulder, down my arm. And it didn't get better for like literally a full year. So I played that year, agony, still made some plays, still played well. Got the new nickname Jelly Shoulder. Then
Do you know what? That's a bit harsh considering that you've gone and played an entire season with a broken shoulder.
Yeah, you got to laugh about it, haven't you? But nobody knows when you're at practice, you do something, then you're like, but it was only discovered the first game of the next season. We were playing Dusseldorf, who were a bit of an enemy team, or became a bit of an enemy team, because we both wanted to get promoted to the GFL at the same time.
So you were essentially just so people can kind of
right, yeah, sorry,
frame it, like in terms of the German league structure, you were essentially one below the Premier League. Is that right?
Yeah, so we were in GFL 2 in the north. It's split north and south, and we were GFL North, GFL 2 North, for my first 2 years. So my second season here with the Potsdam Royals, we went undefeated 16-0 and got promoted to the Bundesliga, to the Premier League, GFL North. But in that first game of that season, I got some contact from their American running back on my shoulder, right where the fracture was. I was like, oh, that hurts. I hope it's not the same thing again, because it's only just started to go away. Went to got a scan like the day after, and the nurse comes in and Saul's there. Saul gets his scan and they're like, yeah, it's all right. I get my scan from the nurse and she's like, not so good. And then they found that they'd actually fractured the coracoid process. So I had about maybe a centimeter square of bone just floating in my shoulder. The option was surgery, but it was all right. I wasn't suffering anymore, so I just got on with it. And then, yeah, like I said, played that second season, 16-0. Pretty cool. And then third season, playing in the GFL with the big boys. That was then a whole nother level. Although the first game we won 56-0, I think, which is always a confidence boost when you go up into a new league. But then you realize, okay, this is like in sort of GFL 2 level, it was like, okay, good teams, good players. Who has the best Americans was also a lot of the time the deciding factor.
Yeah.
Like we played Paderborn, the Paderborn Dolphins one year. They had a sick quarterback and a sick receiver, and they just torched the league throwing to him. Like I had one day covering this guy, Cam Richmond. He must have had close to 300 yards, majority on me. 40-degree heat, something like that. Not the funnest day ever. But then when you get to the next level, every team's got great players. Every team's got great Americans. And then it's almost like who's got the best Europeans becomes a factor. And then coaching becomes more of a factor. Organization becomes more of a factor. Structure becomes more of a factor. Those sort of things become more important to actually performing on the field.
Yeah. Because there are restrictions, aren't there, in terms of how many Americans you can have, then how many European imports you can have, of which you will have been one of them.
You can have, so in the GFL, it's 4 Americans. We can have 2 Americans on the field at any time. And then I think you can sign up to 10 on your roster, I think. And the real money makers are those Americans that also have a dual passport. So they have a European passport, but they're American. Because then you don't count as an American, because an American has to wear an A on his shirt, on his jersey. There's only 2 on the field. So you can actually, we fielded at times a defense with half of them American who played at college and stuff like that. So that's pretty good. Those are the money makers, are the dual passports. Third year was then GFL football. basically the high standard in Europe, and that was really good. I had a really good year. Statistically was, well, the statistics were always a bit dodgy, but I calculated my own from film and I was number one in the league. But then you never know if anyone else has stats that aren't correct because somebody does it on the sideline. But I had a really, really good year. And it was a really good experience to just play at that level, going to like Braunschweig as a New Yorker Lions, playing in front of 4,500 people, playing in just this professional level of football. It was fantastic.
And of course, playing at international level as well.
That's true. Playing for GB, I played at GB also from junior level. So under 19s was a captain at under 19s level. Played at student level. Well, we played at student level, didn't we?
We did.
In Sweden, and then got a couple of caps also playing in the senior team. A couple of turnovers as well. Should have had a touchdown, but I didn't quite make it on a pick.
See, for me, every time I get called up to the senior team, and this is legit what's happened, every time I get called up, number one, I break my leg. Like the week before training camp or whatever. Then number two, COVID starts. Legit. So
was there some stuff this year for them?
Yeah, we were meant to have a few plans. We were meant to have a few qualifiers this year, and
I didn't realize. I had a chat with Jason about it. But I didn't realize there's so much going on.
Yeah, so that's probably not going to happen.
No. But basically, that's my football career up to that point, and then played GFL North for 2 years. End of my, well, it's always interesting because once you get to that level and you've shown yourself, you start getting interest from other teams. It's always quite nice. That's why you wish I had an agent. Because that's another thing, actually, the difference between if you compare it to like NFL and stuff like that, they have agents from when they leave college. So there's a whole other side of the game that's taken care of. Whereas at this level, you do it yourself. It's quite interesting.
What was that like? What was that like? Were you calling up teams and saying?
Well, no, that's what I mean. In the start, so when I wanted to go to Europe, I was sending cheesy messages to all sort of teams, like, I want to be a part of your team. I like your team. Blah, blah. I want to be a part of your family. All this stupid stuff, just trying to get anyone to see you. But then once you've done it and you've got film, and then teams are like, okay, we need good Europeans to compete, they come to you then a little bit, especially when you've played against them. So like, I played really well. I had a big game against the Berlin Rebels. So then they notice you, and then you get contacted by that team, for example, or New Yorker contacted me. Schwäbisch Hall Unicorns contacted me. I could have played with Slacky down there.
Yeah, our boy, James Slack.
Yeah. So then it comes to you after a certain point. You become a bit renowned.
Well, if you're good enough.
If you're good enough, yeah. But I mean, that's also something you have to learn is negotiating. Like, that's literally, you have to negotiate your own salary and all this sort of stuff. So being sat in a meeting is a life skill, knowing, okay, this is what I think I'm worth, and going into a meeting and saying, this is what I want, this is why I think I should get it, and being able to go back and forth and trying to get it. That's a life skill. That's something I did learn from football, being able to, or from the whole situation of knowing your own value and then also going after it and being able to get it is something I've really learned going for that experience. Because I'm not, this kind of gets into my sort of new philosophy on where I see myself going now afterwards with this know your shadows and sharing your medicine. It's about, okay, I know myself. I know that I'm really quite agreeable, which is good. It means I can have a great conversation with you and we can be friendly with each other. I can work well in teams. But you can also be agreeable to a fault. And so then you can let people walk all over you or exploit your work, or these sort of things can take into can happen. And so this is something I did learn through this experience is I know myself, I know I'm quite agreeable, I know I need to be going with a plan and sticking to it of this is what I think I'm worth, and being able to plan enough to put that forward and be confident in it. I'm just going to stick big light on.
Right, go and get light on, lad.
Illuminations in here.
Sorry, I just paused it for a second there. So they'll have missed you say they've got about halfway through.
I said it's like bloody Blackpool illuminations in here.
There we go. So, like, I think what you were saying now, it's a very important skill, isn't it? Like being self-aware of your own kind of abilities and capabilities, but also like the flaws and the faults that you've got to that. Like you said there, you're very agreeable, but there's a point at which that becomes a negative if you just allow people to have their way with you, for example. Yep. I don't know anybody who would want that, but you have to be aware of that in the first place and actually, ask yourself the hard questions as to how does that show up? How does that impact me as a person? And, how does it affect my life? Where it, like, because I know I'm probably the opposite of you in that sense, where I know for a fact I am not agreeable. 100%. Like, I can get on very, very well with people in my inner circle, but like at any point in time, if it doesn't matter who the person is, if they say something that I don't find agreeable or doesn't match my way of kind of my beliefs, my thought processes, that's it. I'm done. Like the hammer comes down and
all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, it completely turns me off, and it's like right, let's have a fight, or let's sort it out, or let's do. When I say let's have a fight, I mean not in an aggressive way, but like let's have a.
That was pretty aggressive.
Let's have a conversation about this, but you change your mind, kind of thing.
Yeah,
that's
the
process behind it.
I think it's very important to know yourself. If you want to, sorry, you go.
No, go.
If you want to go about in the world in a fulfilling and effective way, that's not full of suffering's a strong word, but small things, small little bits of suffering can add up. I think this is really deep now, but I really think that you can have hell on earth. That's really where it is. If you have a life that you don't live to your values, it's an unhappy life, then you can really be suffering, and you can argue whether you go somewhere after life into heaven or hell, but you can have a pretty hellish existence here, and it doesn't have to be full on suffering, but waking up every day and being a bit miserable when you can do something about it. Obviously, there's a lot of things people can do for themselves.
And I think that same kind of control comes down to, even just improving yourself as an athlete. Like we're talking about awareness, aren't we? Where, as an athlete and as a performer and someone that's being paid to play a sport that you love, you do have to be critical of yourself, and you have to self-reflect and look at your own performance. And
absolutely,
you can do better. What was that process like for you while you were playing and while you were going through that?
It changes, I think. When you're in the best state of mind, then you're really up for it. You want to watch, you're not afraid of watching film. You've got a coach who will point out your flaws, but also do it because you want to get better. There's always a bit of a stomach drop moment anyway when it's filming, especially if you did something wrong. It's always going to happen. And when it comes up, you're like, okay, but you get through it and you watch it and you get better from it. And it is, like you said, a skill that translates, this self-reflecting. It's critical. And
that just reminds me of going back to our university days, where we would have film review classroom sessions when we as a team and as a positional group, or like as an offense, as a defense, where we watch the film and you're watching back the game that you've just played. yourself, you know full well that you did something shit, you did something stupid, or you know it's going to get brought up. So you kind of like sit down in your chair and you think, maybe I'll get away with it, maybe I'll get away with it. Like you're looking at the time thinking, please don't show it, or we're
Yeah,
running out
yeah,
of
yeah.
time. You know, normally we'll go on to the opposition. Next week we'll start
Coach,
taking
it's time for scout coach, I think.
and you start breathing easier. You think, oh, time's done. And then he goes, right now. And then he brings it up and you're like, oh, no.
But I mean, it's part of the process. It's like, it's not just watching film. You have to know, okay, how do I do it at practice? How do I do in the game? What can I do better? You've always got to be wanting to get better. That's very important. But it's definitely a bigger thing in football because it's very much there. It's very much, there's the massive tactical side. There's film. I mean, there's not many other sports that it's certainly at an amateur level watch a lot of film like American football do because of the tactical nature. So you get used to it. You have to take it, and at the end of the day, you want to do it because you want to get better. So as hard as it is to swallow that pill initially, you're like, well, okay, good. At least now I'm aware that I'm doing that wrong and I can correct it. So that's good. But I think it goes back to this point of having the right environment. You got to also then be like, here's the film, here's what we did wrong, and here's the environment, the practice film where we support you to then correct it because we want you to correct it. And when that's not there, it's pretty rough. But the difference between that and then towards the end of my career, I hated going into film because I was like so anxious about what might be brought up and just feeling like it's all going to be terrible. That was primarily my state of mind as well. Where was that? So I would not enjoy it.
I was going to say, because you mentioned earlier on when we first started going through this, you were mentioning that you were frequently having panic attacks after games and things like that. Like,
I'm frequent. I had two I can distinctly remember.
How did that come about? Like, when did it start? Why was it? What brought it on? What was going through your mind at the time?
I remember. Well, the first one I remember happening was we played Dresden away, and we lost a close game, and I played really well. Oh, that was just a frustration, I think, brought that one on. That I was frustrated at potentially other people, not necessarily pulling their weight on the field. Frustration, it was a lot of frustration coming together at once. It was pretty horrible because I'd never had one before. I didn't really know what it felt like. So starts with you don't notice it, but your breathing gets quicker, and then you feel like you can't breathe enough, and then you start trying to catch your breath, and you're just hyperventilating, and then that leads to obviously not having enough, having too much oxygen, but not having any available oxygen to actually use, and so then your lips start to tingle, your hands start to tingle, you start to feel a bit dizzy, and it wasn't very enjoyable. And then after the game, obviously the effects last a while, feeling a bit dizzy and confused, I would say, and then coming to terms with what happened. But I think overall it was caused by a lot of frustration of what was surrounding me and going on.
And what did you do about it at that moment in time? Did you speak to anyone? Did you keep it quiet?
I think, well, I spoke to my girlfriend, I know that much. I think I told a couple of players that I really trusted and got along with, and that was really about it. But I did a lot to really kind of deal with it myself, or try to do a lot to deal with it myself. I'd already started. I mean, I've always been interested in mindset and that whole part of performance initially, and then also living and just general sort of mental health and performance stuff, we'll say. So I'd already, tried to deal with these problems myself. I'd meditate before a game, if you can imagine that. I'd go find myself a quiet step somewhere outside the stadium or wherever, and I'd bring myself, calm myself down. Which actually, I mean, it helped because it would help bring me a bit more into the present moment, and so I could better deal with all the anxiety I had building up to a game and just be in the moment. And when you're in the moment, it's there's not the worries about what could happen. There's not the worries about what has happened and all that sort of stuff. You can just take things as they are a bit better without as much judgment. I had a lot of, I guess you'd call them mantras, but basically self-talk, which I carried actually on. Always had that sort of thing, because I mean, that's just part of football anyway. You have all the chants that you have the team identity that you have, but I really took it on from playing at Tamworth with the put the ball down stuff. Because whatever happens, you just put the ball down and it's a new play and you keep going. And it's basically almost like mindfulness, but in a football sense, is that present moment now. Take it as it is and do what you can. Had other ones. I used to write them all on my tape on my wrists. So I guess basically what I had was a pre-game routine. What did I write? What did I have? I put the ball down. Feed the Good Wolf was another one I had. I don't know if you're familiar with that story of the two wolves that fight each other, and then which one wins is the one you feed more.
All right, yeah.
And then you feed the good wolf more than you feed the bad wolf. So basically, feed the good positiveness. And then, I tell you what, I've got them all engraved inside our European Football League Championship ring. All the things I used to write down on my wrists. That sort of stuff. So basically, I had a bunch of self-talk that I tried to deal with, but it only lasts for a certain time. You know, when you're actually doing stuff that's not necessarily always optimized or the most productive for dealing with what you're going through. You can only be your own psychologist for so long, because you don't know what you're doing, and eventually it leads to things like performance catastrophes, which is really what happened in my final year, where I didn't play well and I couldn't play well and I couldn't do anything, basically.
So I think,
I mean, I've avoided a lot of the specific details of what caused it being a little political, I guess, but a mixture of sort of coaching team environment, not just for myself, but seeing it for others as well at all different levels. Financial stuff, I'll say too. Some of the stuff we're talking about with the contract and whatnot. And just a whole bunch of stuff that in the end led to not the most ideal situation for me, and not necessarily the most supportive situation for me.
and like, did you ever have like the worry of, maybe I won't get a new contract, maybe I won't get, the value that I need or that I'm worth?
It was that year was more value, worrying about, okay, I'm doing a lot here. There's other people not doing as much and getting more. So yeah, it was a value issue in that year. But I mean, I addressed that, so that was all right. But then, having to, this is what I mean when I was saying about having an agent. Imagine that you can go to someone, okay, this is what I want, you distanced from it. You don't have to deal with it. You just have to tell someone else and they go do it for you. Have the hard conversations. But when you've got to do it yourself, it can be quite difficult if you're not that way inclined. If that sort of thing is a bit difficult for you to do, because if this, what if they say no? Okay, well then now what do I have? What do? Do I go back to England?
Yeah, well that's it.
Having to deal with that.
It's a completely new level of, well, it's a completely new skill. Like, that's a skill set in itself, being able to negotiate, being able to deal with a contract. But then also, considering, you're probably not skilled in that, but you're a player. You're not an agent. You don't deal with contracts. You don't deal with the wages or the finances. So it's a completely new level of responsibility as well. Whereas, if you get paid less than you're worth and you're the one that's organised that, that's all on you. Whereas if if your agent comes away from the meeting and they know everything that's gone down, you don't know the full picture, but they say they're going to offer you this, maybe that, like, it's a completely different mind game, I imagine, that you would be kind of having going on internally.
Yeah, but like I said, I mean, I know obviously part of it was probably me as my personality and what I need, but there were also a lot of things that could have been better. But basically, all those things led to those sort of anxiety problems and a couple of panic attacks and that sort of thing, and struggling to, well, in the end, like I said, this when the mental side of the game and the mental problems that come with that, the anxiety and stuff like that gets too much, and you just can't perform anymore. is basically how it ended. But I did have a lot of success in spite of that. Like I said, I mean, it was part of a team that went 16-0, won a GFL2 North championship, won a European championship, won 2. Second one was a bit more of a publicity stunt, but we'll take it. But the European Football League one was legit, and that was crazy experience playing in Milan against the Milano Seamen.
Beg your pardon. Sorry, mate.
I waited. That was a crazy game. But even that, I mean, that was like, I forget this right, 43-42 or something stupid.
Wow.
Won with the referees against us. You know what the Italians are like.
Well, I know what referees are like in general.
Yeah, well, imagine when someone's on the payroll then. Because there was, I probably shouldn't say that, but it was relatively obvious.
You can say whatever you like on this podcast. Say whatever you like. Like if you want to believe that the Italian mafia were involved in spot fixing and betting issues in that game,
I mean,
like let's have it.
There were play clock issues. We won in the game. At the very end, we scored a touchdown that ended up getting called back for holding. Or was it the 2-point that got called back for holding? And then we had to basically do the 2-point try again after getting it.
Do you know what? I don't think,
which is crazy.
I don't think that's the first time you've been involved in something like that, is it? Do you remember when we played for Loughborough against Bath?
Oh, that was with the kickoff return. That was we ran that fancy return and Draper scored, but they blew the whistle too early, wasn't it?
Yeah. We scored it, but they blew the whistle because time ran out whilst he was running into the end zone.
But it's weird to think about because it's crazy to win something like that. You know, there's going against a loud home crowd as well and just silence them in a game that was such high scoring as well. But I remember playing the game and being like, if it's just because of certain things that happened in the game on our sideline, and for what I was going through, I was like, I don't care if we win or lose now. Like just checking out of it, just being like, what will be, and I will. It's not worth me really. I don't know, being so caught up in like I have to win and do this because I want to, but the support's not there for me to do that.
Do you know what? I don't
committed
know
and emotionally involved is basically what I would say.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I don't know what your take on this will be, but do you think that that's actually a good thing to do in a very, very high emotion game? Like, let's say it's a championship final or a playoff game or something like that. To be able to distance yourself from the end result and go, look, what will be will be. The end result takes care of itself. I don't care. Well, not that I don't care, but like I'm not focused on that. I'm not worried about that. I'm just going to do me, or I'm just going to focus on my performance. Do you think that is that a good way to go about it, or from a psychological standpoint, is it better to be involved a bit more in the emotion side of it, thinking like, right, we've got to do this, we have to win at the weekend, we must win at the weekend, we can't afford to lose the weekend. If we lose at the weekend, that's it, we're all screwed, kind of thing.
It's always good for it to have meaning. It has to have meaning. If you're going to suffer and go through what you go through in sport, and in life in general, in other fields, it's exactly the same. But talking from a sports perspective makes it sometimes easier to then take out the lessons from it. But it has to have meaning. So I think you should be emotionally involved. You have to care about it. But there's a difference between what you said, which is we have to win at the weekend. We have to win the champion. Excuse me. You have to win the championship because these are outcome goals, and there's so many factors outside of your control that go in to achieving that outcome. You could run a race. I could run a PB tomorrow and then still lose to Usain Bolt, right? If I'm in a race with him, because he might have a great day, or our opponents might just have the best day of their life. There's stuff we can't control. The referees might be terrible. The weather might be terrible, blah, blah, blah. You could then switch that and say, okay, we need to have a great week of practice. We need to practice really well with concentration, blah, blah, blah. Because that's what we'd call a process goal, and it's way more in your control. Sorry, that would be a performance goal. And you're bringing back the circle of control is more within yourself at that point. When you say, we're going to have the best practice of the year this week, or we're going to practice a little bit longer, or that sort of thing. And then you can take that a step further and say, we're going to practice every day with intensity, or we're going to practice every day with, I don't know, compassion. Mistakes are expected. That's fine. We're here to learn. More about how you do things, and that would be then your process goals. And that is much better because the control is solely within yourself, or solely, it's much more self-determined. So to answer your question, I don't think you should be too distant emotionally. I think you should be pretty emotionally involved to the extent that you need it personally, because everybody's different. Everybody needs a different arousal level, right, to perform. This is what you talked about with Sam, actually. It was very interesting because that's something you can do. You can determine, this person, their optimal zone of arousal for this game is at this level. So we want to get into that level before a game, where someone else might need to be a bit chilled, and it depends on the task, blah, blah, blah. But what I think is important is that you can regulate your emotions and your arousal during the performance so that you can function as a team, so that you don't lose your shit and start shouting at one of your players, because he's probably not going to appreciate that. Or you don't go to the sideline and slam your helmet down because it's going to send the wrong message, that sort of thing. Be emotionally involved, but be controlled. Because it's social at the end of the day. And if you're not operating within the sort of social rules that you have in that team, or what's optimal for the team to function, then it's not going to operate at that championship level that we're talking about here. There's another point I wanted to say to that, but I've forgotten, so I'll leave you with that.
That's right. So I think in terms of like what you've said there around the...
But I will say, sorry, that was my coping mechanism to distance myself.
Yeah. So like I'm going to touch on that actually. So like what you were saying there about the zones of optimal functioning, in terms of, there are, again, going back to the conversation I had with Sam, there are different levels of arousal that are optimal or beneficial at any given moment.
Yeah.
And, again, we're talking about that dial, and where are you going to be? Are you going to be 7 out of 10 aggression? That might be your peak kind of area for functioning. But there might be a situation where you need to turn that dial up and you need to get to a 10. Like I kind of learned this myself through playing running back, and then playing kicker at the same time, where you have to, essentially be in a mindset of, I'm getting the ball and I'm going to run through someone. I'm going that way. I've got to run through that guy.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's such a for you. I've just realized that the opposite end of the spectrum you had playing. You had playing running back and then kicking.
Yeah, so
that's fascinating.
For me, I mean, it's quite easy, because naturally, I think I'm naturally
quite easy because you're bipolar. What?
Yeah, well, I think I'm naturally at like a 10 out of 10 for aggression. Like, I'm going to kill him. I don't walk around like that. Like, most of the day, I'm pretty docile. And then it's only certain times of the day that comes out. So, like, you go from that 10 out of 10, like, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to run through him, I'm going to absolutely murder this guy who's going to try and do the same to me. And then you go, right, I've just been absolutely smashed. We're kicking it. And you go, right, okay. Like, and this is where I think it's very interesting. Like you were saying, like on your tape that you have on your wrist, you have like these maybe like mantras that you described them as, I think it was, wasn't it? Mantras written down. I quite often refer to them as triggers. And it's simply like a key phrase or a key word that you have like stored deep down, that you've practiced, you've said it over and over thousands of times, and you use it to trigger or put yourself in a different state, like psychologically, physiologically with your body, so that you can, for me, for when I was kicking, it was just a case of trust your technique. I'd say that'd go through my mind. I'd picture the kick. I'd visualize the kick happening. And that was it. I was down a 1 or a 2.
But that's a lot. Well, you just described that quite a lot. You had your trigger, which is essentially basically all this is what you put into the bracket of self-talk. You had that. You just said you visualized it, so you've got imagery work going in there. You're seeing what you're going to do, which is also super beneficial for performance. And then you bring your arousal state down, and then you kick. So it sounds simple when you say it, but there's so much going on there. There's a lot of steps to be taken.
Well, then, so the other thing that I wanted to introduce and ask you about, because I know like you're doing a degree in performance psychology, aren't you? Like in
Yep.
terms of, we mentioned about those states of arousal, but and having to adapt it to specific moments in a game, like obviously through your career and doing what you've done, like were there specific moments that you had to do that kind of thing yourself as well? And
Punt returns, punt return and kick returning. I loved kick returning and punt returning. It was like just this moment of zen where it was, what would I do? I'd tap my wrist on the tape, little reminder, and then I'd just practice squeezing, just doing this before the ball gets there. Check the wind, obviously pick some grass up. Little tip for anybody who's kick returning, pick some grass, throw it in the air, see where the wind's blowing.
bit hard on a lot of these 4G pitches nowadays.
throw some lick your finger then, do that. I suppose, yeah, we always played on grass out here. And I just squeeze. So I guess that's similar to what you did with the visualizing thing. I'd be visualizing the ball and squeeze. I'd do that. So for kick return and punt return, definitely, because that was just that moment of quietness. Because when you're in the game, there's a little bit of flow that goes on, hopefully. But then there was a break, and it was, it's no easy thing to get a ball booted up in the air, hang in the air for 4 seconds, and you're stood there watching it while there's gunners flying down the field and whoever else coming down to take your head off. So just being able to, I guess what my routine then did for me was allow me to just focus on that.
Yeah. I guess
that for the right place.
That was what I was kind of hoping to pick up on. Like you mentioned there about that state of flow, like going from play to play. And I think this is probably, in American football, it's very easy for us to separate segments or phases of play, phases of the game. But, various other team sports, whether it's basketball, football, rugby, you don't get the chance to do that and, kind of talk to yourself and visualize and break things down bit by bit. Like there might be set plays where you can do that. So how important and what's that state of flow like where everything's kind of subconscious and it just happens?
Can I quickly nip to the bathroom and then I'll answer your question?
Of course you can, mate.
You can edit this bit out.
I can.
In football it's different because of the nature of the task. And I think that actually lends itself to having all these routines that people have and having these mantras. It makes a lot of sense actually because of the break. So you need to have that moment to get yourself back in to the moment. But flow's that thing that everybody's chasing, or at least people that know about it, athletes especially, are chasing flow. It's elusive. It doesn't come very often. So you have to really have all the right things in place to get to that state. But also perform when you're not in that. Like when you've got anxiety and you've got other thoughts going through your mind, you're a bit distracted and stuff like that. How do you go about it? So I think I would have thought that a lot of people, and maybe it's more prominent in football because of the nature of the task being all broken up, would have a lot of these little tricks that they do themselves of how to stay focused. I mean, when we played at Tamworth before the defense went on the field, it was let's take the field was the first thing, and then let's put the ball down. And those little, as you call them, triggers, put you in the right mindset so you can at least be focused, be confident for that series. And then you come off the field and you have your huddle on the sideline, you review things and you correct things and you go from there. It's almost like it's almost in a cycle in football.
Yeah. So just in terms of, I'll ask you about what you're doing in terms of your master's degree in performance psychology in a minute, but what would your advice be for someone who's possibly not really aware of performance psychology at the minute? Where would you suggest or advise that they start in terms of how they can apply a few basic things to improve their own on-field performance?
Take stock of. There's a couple of things you can do. Take stock of what you're good at and where you want to improve. You can almost build yourself a little performance profile. It's something that would actually be used in practice. Is that through a conversation, but obviously by yourself. So you just go through, okay, what do you think you need to perform at your best? How strong do you need to be? Okay, to be at your best, it might be 8 out of 10 strong. I'm currently at 6. Okay, so I should get stronger. Do I need to be more confident? Do I need to be less anxious? Do I need to be more focused? Take stock of where you're at, and then you can start from there, and you can. The difficulty thing is here, we've given this sort of advice, is you don't want to give advice that's not good for somebody, because with like what I went through, I tried to do it myself and it worked until I'm talking German now, until a certain point. And so I don't want to give too specific advice, but I think, like I said, you need to know yourself and also know where you want to be. And then you can work at closing those gaps. If it's focus, okay, maybe you can try having a mantra, having some self-talk, something, as you call it, a trigger word. That's quite a nice way of looking at it. Have something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of actually describing someone to start up as well. Just, create that level of self-awareness, that little kind of
it always starts with awareness, I think.
Yeah, and setting up that performance web of all the aspects that are involved in you being what does a 10 out of 10 actually look like? Rating yourself, scoring yourself, and then obviously then you can put an individual intervention in place, can't you?
Yeah. Awareness, I would potentially advise that some sort of mindfulness practice is always a good idea. There's different ways of doing it. You can do it quite structured. You can do a basic meditation, concentrating on your breath, that sort of thing. That's what I tend to do. I've had periods where I've done it daily. I've had periods where I've gone months without it, but the benefits are always with you. Once you've it's a very important skill for life, I think. But once you've got it, you've always got a kind of a baseline ability with it. And then you kind of top it up, or you can top it up if you don't want to practice every day. But for example, what I do is the object. So where my focus is always on my breath or on the breathing sensations, but I start with like an expanded view. So I'm always trying to focus on my breath. That's the object. So if I get distracted or my mind wanders, I bring it back to my breathing. But then also I start with taking account of what's going on in sort of like external stimuli. Okay, so outside I might hear the road. I take account for hearing the road outside. I take account for my girlfriend sitting there. I know she's there. Take account for everything like that. What comes to me, and I take it in. I think, okay, it's there. Good. Leave it now. Then I constrict that awareness to bodily sensations. So all the while I'm doing this, I'm concentrating on my breathing. I'm always thinking, okay, breathe in, breathe out. What's that sensation? But then I'll do like a little bit of a body scan. So I'll think, oh, where's the pressure in my feet? What are my toes feeling like? Just work my way through my body, taking account of any body sensations. Then I bring it to my face and I relax my face. And then eventually all I'm left with is concentrating on my breath and only really being aware of my breathing sensations. Because you still hear things from outside, you still feel things, but they don't necessarily distract you because you're just aware of them. You've got the focus and then you've got your peripheral awareness. That's basically what mindfulness is. So that's something you could practice, because then you can do other ways. You can do like a thought watching practice. Perhaps you sit there and you let your thoughts come and you can imagine putting them on clouds, for example. You just, I don't know, whatever comes to your head, because if you sit there and all you're doing is breathing, some pretty weird thoughts will pop in your head. But that's the point, that you can then take that and non-judgmentally just let it go. And then the next one comes and you can practice those sort of things, which then translate actually onto the field. Like you can concentrate on your focus. You can focus on what you want to focus on. You can say, for the punt return, for example, I need to focus on the ball. I'm aware that the gunners are there. They're a bit peripheral, but my concentration is on the ball, and that's where it's going to stay. And you can do this. There's not like I'm fighting, I'm aware that there's other stuff going on, and I can consciously say, my focus is now here, and hold it there, and it gets better with practice. So I think some sort of mindfulness practice would be a good idea, just generally for everybody.
Yeah.
For athletes, I think it's good as well because it works a lot of the cognitive side of things and can free up sort of working memory and stuff that you might need for when you're playing. Another interesting sort of task you can do, it relates back to this arousal level that we were talking about, is you can go through, okay, this is what happened when I performed my best. This was sort of the things I did pre-game. This is sort of how I felt in the game. I was in this sort of state and I said these sort of things to myself. I had these sort of thoughts. What's a picture or a concept of my best performance? A state of being in my best performance. And then you can do the same for your worst performance. In my worst performance, this is how I felt. This is what I did. Pre-game, I was like this. And then you know, okay, I need to be more in the state that's nearer to best performance state. And then you can potentially work on some sort of strategy specifically to get in that state. But like I said, it's very much an individual process. So what I would say is, if you haven't got access to somebody who knows who can help you with these things, then you can read about it. There's books out there. There's the internet out there. But if you know yourself, then different things work for different people. Like self-talk works better for some people. Imagery, visualization sort of things work better for other people.
Yeah, I think without going into without even going into too much thought or too much detail and getting into the real nitty gritty aspects of, the psychology of it, I think if you simply focus on, your best performance or the best performance you've ever put in, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? Analyze yourself, look back at what was going on in your mind, in your body, and create those same conditions again.
Yeah.
Like physiologically, if you can go there with your body and create that level of energy, your mind will follow. Likewise with your mind, if your mind is there first and you start thinking the same thoughts and feelings, like positive or focused, controlled, relaxed, whatever those things are, as soon as your mind starts to think those things and your breathing matches, the rest of your physiology changes with it. And being able to link those two together, I think for anyone that's, looking down the sports performance route or wanting to be an athlete or simply just wants to perform at their best day in, day out, whether it's as, just as a parent or as a person, man, it's the same principles. The same principles apply, don't they?
Oh, it all applies to everywhere. This is something I'm really I would love to do, is to take these skills that people tend to only they tend to only associate them with high performance, with the military, with Olympic athletes. And I think you can apply this to sitting at home when you're doing home office, and you can make that experience much better for yourself and more fulfilling and get more out of it. And they're not secrets. Like, these are things you do anyway. You might just not be aware of them. Like, it happens regardless of whether you pay attention to it. You have a mindset and you have thoughts that happen regardless. Yep. So being able to consciously do something that I think can apply to everybody and make a lot of people a lot happier at the end of the day. But one thing I just realized when we were talking then was, just to kind of sum up, advice would be to be self-aware, to know yourself, mindfulness, and then also a plan of action. Well, knowing where you want to be and then having a plan to get there and trying to follow through on it with compassion for yourself, because it will be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right there. I think with that compassion, you've got to give yourself cut yourself a bit of slack, give yourself some credit, and appreciate yourself in the process.
Yeah. Take stock of the good things you've done, even if it wasn't perfectly what you wanted to do. Appreciate you did something and keep doing it, and it'll snowball. And next thing you know, you're playing professionally, or you got a promotion or whatever.
So in terms of your sports performance psychology master's degree at the moment, what's going on there? What is it you're looking into? What's going on?
So it's performance psychology, and it's at Bangor University in Wales. It's an online degree, actually, So I'm an English
I think every degree is
Germany
probably online at the minute.
Wales. Yeah, but mine's specifically distance learning. I'm full multicultural. It's performance psychology, so it's just about any sort of performance domain and the psychology involved with that. So it's not just sport. It's the way I see it is that you can basically apply it to any way, because everybody has a craft that they're working towards, whatever it may be. People tend to have something they're doing, whether it's just your job or hobby sport or painting. I don't know, anything. Most people tend to have a craft, or at least they want to do some sort of craft, I like to call it. So it's basically a lot of psychology that's to do with doing things under pressure, in team settings, in individual settings, motivation, personality. Well, that's obviously just part of general psychology, is people's personalities and how that applies. But it's fascinating. It's really fascinating.
Is there anything that you've come across in doing that at the moment that's either completely changed your thinking on something, or just opened your mind to something in particular?
It's definitely confirmed that the role, like the individualization, is basically king, but to an even more specific level. Like I said, like visualization is something that gets thrown about a lot. Like, just imagine yourself doing this or imagine yourself doing that. But for some people, the brain isn't necessarily wired up, simply said, to use that. They're more of a verbal learner. And so, back to this example, they'd better respond to using self-talk. So individualization at a more specific level is king. It's not always practical, obviously, but what else is new that I haven't really thought of? It's confirmed a lot. Like I said, it's been a really strange experience of learning fascinating stuff, and also it's been like a little bit of therapy for myself as well, learning about like what happens to performance under pressure and how it can go wrong and what causes that and what you can do to fix it and stuff like that. It's quite eye-opening and cool to see.
And I think something to bear in mind there is performance under pressure doesn't necessarily mean performance on the football field or whatever. It might be performance in the boardroom, it might be performance in the bedroom, it might be
Could be anything,
performance in.
because it's an arena where you're going to do something and you're feeling anxiety or pressure or scared or whatever, and it doesn't matter where it is. I think the difference is, like I said earlier, is like sport is quite obvious in a lot of ways, in that here's the pressure, here's the task, and here's the desired outcome, where it's not always so obvious in everyday life.
Yeah, I think like, because the same emotions, the same feelings, the same physical processes, or the same physiology in the body is there in everyday life. It's there in sport. The only thing that is more apparent is that really separates the two is that in sport it's highlighted and put on a massive billboard with bright lights saying, with a very obvious message to it, rather than if you're playing a high level game, or you're in a high stress situation in sporting competition, or the physicalities turn up, it's very obvious. Whereas in day to day life, we don't realize the stresses and strains that we're putting on the body. So maybe then we don't do the recovery work.
No, that's true. And there's certainly, I would say, for most people in real life, it's more this low level chronic stress that gets you, the low level chronic anxiety, the low level chronic negative affect that gets people, and being able to deal with that. Yeah.
So especially right now, like with regards to, obviously everyone's in lockdown pretty much, well, across the UK, across probably most of Europe. How have you coped with that on a psychological level? Not just being in lockdown, but also, not being able to play sport. Because I think that's a big. I know for myself, not being able to play sport, having a season cancelled, then not even being able to go to the gym and train.
Can you not train?
Well, technically I'm allowed, but it's fucking hard work to get it sorted out. So it's
Yeah.
getting access to the space and being able to use the equipment as and when.
Well, in that sense, I've been very fortunate. I mean, sport I didn't really miss at the beginning because it all happened after I retired and I wanted a break from that sort of scene anyway. I needed to calm down after 10 years of having one thing in my mind, which was football, and doing that basically every single moment. So that was a nice break in a lot of ways to take that pressure off. That even if I didn't have a game next weekend, I've got a season coming up in 2 months, and I'm already getting ready for that. So it was nice to get that break. Working out wasn't a problem because of where I'm working. So I work in a physio facility where we also have like a training area. Amviku, it's called. Shout out. So we have a medicinal license, so we've been allowed to stay open the entire time. We had to close the training club, so people who were only members there to train weren't allowed to come anymore. But if you had a prescription from the doctor for physical therapy, then you could come. So we've still been open and I've still been allowed to train there. So I've been training enough, but whole other kettle of fish. In when was it? October last year, I had a spontaneous pneumothorax, which basically means my lung collapsed by itself. This is why people should stay healthy, because I managed to walk around for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 4 days or so, 5 days with one functioning lung.
Oh my
So
God.
basically, I'm now getting back into training because I had to have some time off. I had time off anyway because stopping playing football, I was working out, just maintaining. But obviously from what happens when you stop training and there's a period of maintenance where you can maintain your level of strength, explosiveness, blah blah blah, and then you go into untraining. So I was truly untrained, and then this hit me. I woke up one day and tell the story. I woke up one day about 7:30. I wanted to get out of bed and I just got this shooting pain on my right side at the bottom of my ribs, just really sharp pain. I thought, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
Didn't think anything of it. Wandered to my kitchen and I was like, oh no, this is not good. I had to lay down on the floor for like half an hour just to be comfortable. Managed to clamber up to the table. Just had this, it was just pain on my right side, right under my ribs. I was like, this is not good, but we'll see what happens. Basically spent most of the day laying on the sofa. If I laughed, if I coughed, it was very painful and it would shoot all on my right side. And then I started to get pain behind my shoulder blade on my right side. Obviously, Dr. Google came to call, and he was telling me that it was gallbladder stones. So I thought, okay, maybe I've got a gallbladder stone. It's been in my family history. So I thought it's not unreasonable idea, and I had all the symptoms. But the problem was at work. This is so stupid, and this is why it's it's good to push yourself and do take no days off, but it's also good to not be a stubborn idiot, which I've also learned through various experiences. I was going to work because there was no one else to cover my shift at work because everybody's away. So I like hobbled to work with this pain. I'm like, I can probably sit here and just instruct people to do something. But they said, no, that'd be stupid. And then I went to the hospital, had an ultrasound. Well, when I first, I nearly passed out on the way to the hospital. That was it. I was very dizzy and confused. Had blood work done, had a urine test. That was all fine. Had an ultrasound scan. That was also fine. Got seen very quickly. Then had to wait like 8 hours, just laying there in agony, waiting to get the results. Ridiculous, but whatever. Got seen. They were like, yeah, can't see anything. Maybe it's just muscles or nerve damage or something weird going on. I'm like, cool. They gave me a painkiller drip, which ruined me. Then hobbled home, just feeling like I was going to throw up. Got home, not eaten for like 12 hours or drunk any water for like 12 hours. Spent the night throwing up. So whenever I ate anything, drank anything, I'd just come up like half an hour later. Next morning, I went to my doctor. He did an ultrasound scan and couldn't find anything. And he just said, okay, we'll just see how it goes over the next few days and over the weekend. So I was just resting at home, had no energy like you do when you're sick. So I just thought some sort of illness. Got no energy because I've not eaten. Would go out on a walk just to get some fresh air and would have to sit down every 10 meters. Over the weekend, the pain sort of got better. It moved a bit more central, sort of like my windpipe. And I just got serious shortness of breath and exhaustion. Like I go up a flight of stairs and I'd just be completely out of breath. Went to Berlin on the Sunday. So that initially happened on Wednesday and this went out Sunday. I went to Berlin, did an escape room, got out, went for some barbecue food. I started feeling pretty rough. And then I was planning, okay, I'll go to my doctor on Monday because in Germany, you go to your doctor, you get a sick note, and then you can be off work and you get paid, blah, blah, blah. That's how it works. So that was my plan for Monday. Monday, slowly walked to my doctor's, just getting out of breath all the time, just from walking. Just exhausted. Got there, saw my doctor. I was like, yeah, the pain's a little better, but now I've got this real bad shortness of breath, this exhaustion that I get. He listened to my lungs and he was like, okay, I think it's this. We're going to send you next door for an x-ray straight away right now. So I went next door hobbling about, went for my x-ray, and then that's when they discovered it. So I came out of the x-ray, saw a new doctor, the guy who did the x-ray. And I could tell he was very worried, but he was trying to stay very calm. He was like, Mr. Kenyon, this is what it is. Mr. Kenyon, trying to make sure I'm concentrated and with it and understanding the seriousness of the situation, which I had no idea because they're speaking German to me, which I understand. But when they started talking medical stuff, you're like, am I really getting the full picture here? I'm not quite sure.
Oh, I mean, of course, because you're hearing it in a different language.
Yeah,
So you're like,
also
right,
just to click in my head because he was showing me the picture and I couldn't really tell what was going on with the x-ray, but basically what has happened is somehow, so a pneumothorax is where your lung collapses, and what happened to me is somehow a hole appeared in my lung and my lung collapsed. And it was also a tension pneumothorax, which means that because it's collapsed and I breathe in, the air comes in, goes into my lung and then goes out of my lung and then fills up this sac that you have around your lung, pleural sac or something it's called. So that was expanding and pushing my windpipe and everything to the left and pushing pressure onto my heart and stuff. So it's literally, it's life threatening. So I was then had my x-ray at the doctor's. They called an ambulance, took me into the x-ray room to prepare me for an emergency surgery there, where they'd have to stick basically a nail through my chest cavity, pop, to let all the air out so my lung could inflate again.
Decompress the chest, yeah.
But I was pretty stable. I mean, I'd walked around for 5 days or so with it, so I wasn't gonna collapse there. The weird thing is, it ties in with all the experiences that I've had, and this idea of being mindful, and I don't know. I was weirdly relaxed. Like I was like, okay, I'm accepting that this is happening. It is what it is, and I've got to go through this now. So went with the ambulance to the hospital and had emergency surgery, which I was awake for. The first one was just a local anesthetic, and that was a case of making an incision, going between my ribs, sticking a tube in, sucking out all the air and the fluid that was in this sac. And then my lung would fill up again, which was a very interesting experience to be like, okay, surgery done, sit up, and now please breathe. And it was just like a weird wheezing inhale and a really hard cough for it felt like 5 minutes. I couldn't tell you how long it was, but it felt like a while. That was just heaving air in and then coughing. So after that surgery, I had a drainage machine in my side. So I had a tube going into basically to my lung area that would suck out any liquid and air that comes out. Because on the next day, I would then have to have my surgery to repair the hole and whatnot. And that was a full general anesthetic. I don't know how long it lasted, a couple of hour surgery, I think. That was pretty grim. They shaved off the skin off my lung where the hole was, so that would heal up. And then they also took skin off the front and back of my lung, the front and back of this. I'm sure it's plural sac, but I'll just keep calling it a sac to get it right. So that would stick together. So in case my lung collapses again, it'll be held at the front and the back, so it doesn't actually collapse.
Yeah.
Then I had a week in hospital with a drainage machine in. So it was basically a tube going through my side and into this like little tiny suitcase that would suck all the blood out, suck all the liquid out, suck all the air out when it leaked until it healed. So it was a week in hospital, and then I left.
And I think if anything says don't take your health and fitness for granted, and put in the work, condition yourself. You've got every chance of surviving and
It's
being much more okay when adversity does strike.
Exactly. It's like an insurance policy, and it's a very cheap insurance policy. Because I really might not have made it out of that situation had I not actually been in great shape. Like all the doctors were pretty amazed I'd walked around with it. Literally, I'll send you the X-ray afterwards because it's quite shocking when you see it. That on one side is this beautiful lung, you can see all the blood vessels. On the other side is just a vacuum of it's just black space, and then a little bag. So that actually gave me, because I didn't have much motivation to train after retiring, because I don't know, I didn't think it would happen, but I realized that I actually trained for football. I enjoyed it. I loved it. I loved all the aspects of training. But a big part of me doing it was because I had a reason to do it, which was football. And staying fit and healthy and trying to look good wasn't enough of a reason. But having that experience really motivated me to realize, okay, to be in good shape to overcome adversity like that, and then developing new goals of what I want to do with physical fitness.
Yeah, I think if you're not fit and you're not healthy to a degree, there's no chance that you'd be walking around with a collapsed lung for 5 days.
No. But then I really wish I could show people what they're capable of, and I try to do it with my work, but I think just get healthy, and then depending on what you want to do, get strong and push yourself, and then you know what you're capable of a little bit more. So when adversity hits, you can deal with it a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's a great message as well. I think that's so important for people to get a handle on that. Before, like, this is great because it's literally been, for me, it's literally been like we've been back in the car on the way down to Tamworth again.
Exactly.
These were literally the conversations that me and you would have for our entire length of our car journeys. Before I let you go, I want your top 3 book recommendations.
Oh, okay.
For anything you like, whether it's psychology, sports performance, health, longevity, success, whatever it is. What are your top 3 books that you would happily recommend or advise people to read?
Man's Search for Meaning by
Viktor Frankl.
Viktor Frankl. I was going to say Joseph Frankl then. Viktor Frankl, yeah.
I hope it's Viktor Frankl now.
I'm pretty sure it is. I can Google it quickly.
Yeah.
Cheating. Yeah, it's Viktor Frankl. That everybody should read that. Get some perspective. It's one of the most moving books I've ever read.
Yeah, 100% agree with that.
I want to say, it's in my head now, I'll say it, 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. It's a heavy read. But you can definitely get something from that. Heavy read, takes a while, might need a couple of reads. I mean, I'm thinking about reading it again now, just to go back with it, another set of eyes, another set of experiences. A third one. I'm struggling now. I read a lot as well. Oh, this is really difficult actually, because there's been a lot of like my problem is with a lot of self-help books is that they're written by people that a lot of it is it's not myth, it's not pseudoscience, but it's in that realm of here's what worked for me, here's a bunch of confirmation biasing examples of why it'll work for you, which I think it's good to read stuff like that. Like you can read like The Obstacle is the Way is a book that I really enjoyed, but looking back it's probably quite cliche, but I think people can get stuff with that. It goes into like more stoicism and growth mindset. So I think some sort of introduction, I think people should just explore. For the third one, I think find a topic you're interested in or that intrigues you a little bit, because I can't think of a third one now, so I'll just give this excuse.
Well, they can have that one that you've recommended. The Obstacle is the Way. They can have that one.
It's a good one.
What's your tip? What's your advice anyway?
And buy a book about it. Oh, I tell you what it'll be. You can try Compete to Create. It's an audiobook by Dr. Michael Gervais and Pete Carroll. That's a good one.
Compete to Create.
That's a quite a nice one. It's not gonna blow your mind, but it might make you think about how you go about your life a little bit and how you can take some ways to improve it. It's very friendly too.
I think that's something that everyone needs to do as well. Like, what's the point in having a mind if you're not going to contemplate your life and how you can improve it and what you're going to do better, how you're going to help other people, how you're going to contribute? I think that's massively important.
Because my mind's whirling now of all the books I've read, because there's like business books I've read that have been like The Lean Startup, fantastic book if you're a business owner like yourself, how you can streamline it and get going in this world. Books, just read is the end of the day, because there's so much knowledge out there. Like, for example, I do a degree, it's going to take me 2 years. I can read a book in a month and get so much from it. And you can go from so many different areas. And once you get quite well read, you can bring it all into whatever domain you work in. So I could read a book on, I don't know, business, bring it into, okay, I want to start a business, but using my psychology, or here's a mathematical book, or an engineering book, or even a story with a lesson in it. How can I use that to then integrate that into my business and apply it in some way? Like you can take the best from everybody, from humans, basically. I think books are where all our knowledge is, and you can stand on the shoulders of giants, as they say, and get all this knowledge and apply it. But find something you're interested in or intrigues you. Find somebody who's involved in that area, an expert, someone that does it for a living, I don't know, whatever, and just give it a read, because then you at least have some motivation to do it.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to books, the way I like to think about it is, the person that's written the book has most likely grown up, lived, gone to university, specialised, done a degree, then maybe had a 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50-year career in that one particular area. They've written a book about it, summarising probably a lot of their best lessons, their thoughts, their experiences, and you get to read about that in 300, 400, 500 pages, whatever it is.
Just this condensed.
And that's like 60 years worth of targeted, purposeful learning and practice and dedication to a craft that you can just pick it up, you can download it, you can buy it, read it, listen to it, watch it, consume it, and apply it yourself in an instant. I think it's pretty ridiculous the way that we can pass that kind of stuff down. A little bit like I hope is going to happen with this podcast.
Hopefully.
Yeah, the realm of sports performance, the realm of sports psychology is definitely better off with you in it. I want to say a massive thanks for you coming on the show today and giving me your time. It's been absolutely class, and hopefully everybody listening has enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed catching up and chatting with you again. So thank you very, very much for coming on, mate.
It's been brilliant. I've been very much looking forward to it, and it feels nice to just talk about these things, and I really hope somebody gets something from it, and then we've done well. So thank you for inviting me on, and thank you to everyone for listening.
I'm sure they will. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate. So then, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed that episode there with John Kenyon. Obviously, speaking a lot about mindfulness, the psychology around sports performance. But again, you can apply that to your own life. It's not just sport that it's applicable for. It's not just sport that it's useful for. It's useful every day, even with the smallest of things. So hopefully your life will be a little bit better off from having listened to this podcast episode. I would urge you, please, as much as you can, if you can give us a review, give it a like, give it a share, spread the word, get someone else to listen to it if you think that they're going to benefit from it. We very much appreciate you doing that, and we will continue to deliver and continue to do these podcast episodes for you. And probably even just out of pure selfishness, I'll carry on anyway, because I learn loads from doing these and taking the notes from it. So yeah, I hope you are gaining something from it too. Anyway, that is it from me for now. I'm sure we'll definitely have John Kenyon back on the show sometime soon. Me and Chris will be back again next time with another episode for you around training, nutrition, sports performance, whatever it's going to be. We're not entirely sure yet, but we will come up with something good. So for now, that is it. Lenko out.